And on this note, we would welcome Dr. Samuel Okafor to make his presentation. So that Dr. Samuel Okafor is a professor at University of Nigeria at the Department of Sociology and Anthropology. Yeah, over to you, Dr. Samuel.
Thank you very much, my brother Yolola. I appreciate my big brother Mugumbate. I was very, 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 very surprised to hear about this rare strategic move to get Africa back, which our brother has started. I appreciate so much, and I'm starting on the existing protocol. I greet you from University of Nigeria. I am presently at Nsukka, the wonderful place of the whole world. Okay, I am here this morning for the first time to join this kind of program, which I would like to continuously move with. And I'm here to present on the topic. I'm there. Thank you very much. I am here to talk on the topic African nations, pathological system waiting for social work, social intervention. The theme sounds so hard because it's a mix-up of clinical language and social scientific language. But at the same time, I think what social work has come to do in our generation is a clinical work with a social scientific perspective. To start with, Africa exists in different dimensions, and that is why anybody that wants to deal with Africa as a system having problems should understand the different dimensions and know where the problems are coming from and know where to start from. Because if we continue to make a random argument about the situation of Africa, we may not go far. But being specific from time to time will help us to solve one problem from one time to the other. Presently, we are talking about the movement of Africa to the next level in terms of development. I remember some time ago, nobody was talking about development. We are talking about liberation from the evasion of unknown power clusters. But today we are talking about development because we have, I think, somehow overgrown the problem of slavery and all the rest of them. Be possible to, and the problems Africa, this particular meeting, we're talking about the social work, how they can come in, how they can take responsibility, even though other groups are taking responsibilities. Now, Africa exists in different dimensions, and that is what we can take as the concept of Africa. Looking at Africa, Africa exists as a race among other races across the world. Africa exists as a continent among other continents, about 7 continents across the world. I think from this basis was where African Union was established, knowing that we are a continent that has power to decide our destiny, coming together as different nations, different sub-societies. Africa also exists as a power dimension. Power dimension means, in this situation, it's talking about coming out from the vestiges of colonial domination, vestiges of neo-colonial domination, even though presently we're talking about African power in the dimension of existing outside colonization, which is more dangerous, that's more superior, more intelligent than the previous strategy they adopted. Also, Africa exists as a geographical entity, which is captured as a continent located within the Saharan desert and also across the Arabian Peninsula, though the earlier excavators have succeeded in causing confusion about the Arabian Peninsula and the issue of North Africa, where we are struggling for who is who, and that is the problem of basically the problem Yemen is passing through today, because Yemen can't even define where they belong to. Okay, from that, we want to look at Africa in the global economy. Africa in the global economy, the irony. Somebody may be asking, what's irony? The irony is the fact that when you come to natural resources distribution across the world, Africa is leading. What I have here is from the United Nations Environmental Program, which sometimes these are teleguided or data documentation, which is limited to the purpose of whoever that is sponsoring the data documentation. But at least this is what they could be able to publish. But we know when we go across Africa, we have more than this. And now, presently, what we have is sure that Africa basically is having a large chunk of the global natural resources, which is the basis for development. When you talk about development of humanity, we also have the issue of population here. Africa is one of the domineering population across the world, having the most teeming youths across the world, which is the potential labor force, potential developmental capacity of any region, any country, anywhere in the world. Then you come to labor, the basis of development and sustainable socio-economic development. Africa is still leading because Africa currently is pushing out labors to America, Europe, China, Canada, Asia, and other parts of the world that cares for their labor, but not caring for their labor because from Africa you can get it in quantity because they are naturally endowed with all it takes to work hard to survive in any country. And now this is the reason why across the world, Africa is the much labor needed across nations, especially the so-called developed nations. They are developed with the labor from Africa. Now, according to World Population Review, we see that in the United Nations that is making a decision that is definitely dealing with Africa currently, because most of the problems of Africa are indirectly nurtured and pushed from United Nations. Unfortunately, in this United Nations, Africa has the largest population, having 54 countries among other nations. The highest that followed Africa, I think, is from Asia, is about 46. Africa is having the 54 nations in United Nations, showing that we have the majority in terms of population strength in that dimension. Now, we want to look at where we are after all having all these things, and that is what we call pathological situation of Africa, pathological condition, the symptoms of pathological condition. Now, clinically, when you talk about the pathological condition, you are talking about a situation showing symptoms of illness, which can be caused by any microbe or of any degree. Now, there are such situations, you see that even a little function well will be showing sign that I am not healthy. And now Africa is found in that situation. According to the World Bank 2019, Africa is a destination of global poverty, with the majority of the global poor living in Africa. Now, this documentation by 2019 was talking that about 50% of the poor in the whole world are located in Africa, majorly in 3 countries, including Nigeria. Which other country within Africa? I know this shows you where we are in terms of our healthiness, socioeconomic healthiness, and all the rest of them. Africa is the destination of countries with the poorest public institutions. Even when we are sending out labors across the world, the most efficient medical doctors you can find across the world, at least about 60% of them, you can still locate them back in Africa. The majority of the people who are running the institution of the so-called developed nations and all the rest of them are mostly Africans who are working as laborers, who are working as slaves in these systems. Yet in our own house, in our own home here, our social institutions are very, very poor that they cannot even serve the basic needs for which they were established. Africa is the most underrepresented in the most underrepresented continent. Now we're talking about Africa having about than every other continent. Yet we are the most underrepresented because every decision made in the United Nations turned out to be almost against Africa, almost in a way of using Africa for other nations' development. Across the global continent, Africa is the destination of the group of a high rank in the whole world, is the corrupt leaders, the corrupt element who are collaborating with the neo-colonialists to run the system. That's all we have, another sort of religious crisis, a high capital flight to Europe. High capital flight, sometimes at the United Nations and the World Bank, the analysis is always in the dimension that Africa is bringing money home from overseas. But when you critically look at it, you see that from our corrupt politicians and other elements in the system, there is a high capital flight from Nigeria, from Africa to other nations across the globe. And this tells you one of the sources of our challenges and poverty we are suffering here. Because at the surface, we want to see the European Union, the America, and the so-called developed nations as if they are bringing back to Africa. But when you look at it, you discover that it is Africa that is giving to them, because most of the investment in Europe, in America, in Asia, even in this Middle East of yesterday, are done by Africans who are stealing the public fund to go and invest it somewhere. Yet we are the poorest. We are among the most pitied continent in the world. Now, the pathogen of colonialism and neo-colonialism in African system, which is the problem and the beginning of what we have today as a pathological condition of Africa. With all these problems that are going on, they are hanging on colonialism and neo-colonialism. And we want to look at where this thing started from. Before the 1885 Berlin Conference that eventually formalized European imperialistic mission in Africa. Africa has been sustainably attacked from all dimensions because of the natural resources in Africa. Before the colonialism was formalized, Africa has been a Union, American, and even Asian, all of them. And this were operating in the dimension of merchant ship, slave trade. Colonialism was formalized for them to have opportunity to fully do it officially, so that a nation will come and say, this one is our own, this one is our own. An aberration that happened in the past. The pathogens we're talking about, African system that made Africa ill. Presently, Africa is ill. Now, this started with the formalization of colonialism and the intrusion of the neo-colonialism. Neo-colonialism for this meeting is talking about the new way of recolonizing African nations, basically, because I know other nations are still suffering this problem, but I know basically Africa is the most affected. The neo-colonialism is one of the trajectory, one of the strategy that the so-called developed nations and imperialistic League of Nations are using to hold Africa down. And you can see this in the way we do our politics. You see this in the way we select our political leaders. You see this in the way we run our socio-economic activities. Like somebody mentioned earlier, we are dependent on these people for borrowing and donations, economic aids. Yes, they have systematically positioned you in that way, so that whatever you are doing, you will still come back to them. Yet, coming back to them is not because of they are giving you anything. Coming back to them is to psychologically induce you to depend on them while they are exploiting you continuously. Now, the pathogens of colonialism and neo-colonialism is what brought Africa where we are today, keeping us in what we call a pathological situation or condition of Africa. And this started with the intrusion of Africa through all manner of socio-economic activities from European nations and American nations, which moved from the era of merchant and empire building to slavery, from slavery to colonialism, and presently in the recent neo-colonialism. Now we look at the pathogens of how these things are made manifest. Colonialism and neo-colonialism in African system, they did not just appear, was not, an accidental thing, even though some nations started entering because of they started seeing benefit by other nations. But this were properly organized, properly planned, such that, a common man cannot easily hook up this problem. Somebody that has no deep knowledge and understanding of how these things operate cannot be able to do anything. And that is why you see many political leaders crying and all the rest of them. What they do is when you make noise, they know that you're ignorance of the system. When you make a noise, they still use the system to collapse you. Now, we want to look at how this system came up and how it is operating today. Following the institutionalization of colonialism and neo-colonialism, virtually every African nation and their socialist republic institution became a powerful channel through which colonialism and neo-colonialism sustained. Colonialism was a basic learning and institutional processes, such as capturing the attention of the population. Now, in the first, when you come to a social system, until you create a scene, like what we are doing now, like this kind of program, until you scene, people will not begin to think about certain things. It is when you create a scene, you draw people closer and now start channeling their understanding and knowledge about something. And now, they started by capturing the attention of the people. For instance, the way they took over different nations into colonialism were such that even the people among themselves were seeing it as a new celebration, a new thing that that came to people that are so-called uncivilized. But gradually, they were now drawn into the system that they were unknowingly tying themselves and the generations coming after them. Now, these learning processes include capturing the attention of the population and building the colonialist covert agenda in the memory of the population. You see that average youth, even in our own time today, is struggling for nothing but how to be like colonialists. Average youth in African system today, except people who may have come to you today, all his efforts today is to become like the colonialists. The lifestyle they left for us when they came in here and all the rest of them. Such that you come today, you hardly find youth who think about tomorrow in terms of the social development and the system rehabilitation. They only think about themselves, capitalist tendencies. Now, they also subverted the indigenous languages. Of course, what we are struggling for today is that across the world, you are basically struggling for almost two languages. French and English. French is gradually fading off because of their colonialist strategies has been broken, and they are not, reforming their new colonialist strategy. What is dealing with them in what do you call it, Mali, Burkina Faso, elsewhere, because the US and the Europe, other European Union are gradually pushing them off to take over through the game of neocolonialism. Now, through language, they've already made you, because in the first place, if you go to some rural areas today, one of the evidence that you are a learned person, one of the evidence that you are one of the powerful people in the community is if you can speak English well. Another one is elevating colonialism and the neo-colonialist logical order in the life pattern of the population, subjecting the colonialized and the neo-colonialized to the writing pattern of the, and more importantly, enslaving the thought pattern of the colonized and neo-colonized in the logical framework of the colonialists. And what does this mean? They have patterned your life that everything you are pursuing today as average African is to hit a target they have set for you, a standard they have set for you. Not even how you yourself will survive as a person in a system, not even how your system can be sanitized for a better tomorrow. Now, we want to look at the social work as a social health institution. Now, I'm not going to take much of our time here because I don't know how many minutes I'm having. Mr. Moderator, how many minutes am I having?
You have less than 5 minutes, brother.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. Now, social work as a social health institution, the way I captured it here is this. Let me tell you, social work started as a humanitarian work, and the humanitarian work has no value if it cannot locate the real problem people are passing through. For instance, somebody cannot come to you with malaria and you are giving him food and say, go home, eat well, and he can eat the food and die tomorrow. You go for the burial. But until you understand that the problem this person is having is a malaria and deal with it, you have not solved his problem. And now that is where social work comes into the problem we are having in Africa presently. The humanitarian work of social work is focusing on the pathological situation of Africa. We are really ill as a system. We are really ill as a continent. And now, Social work has come as a healing mission, as a healing assignment to those who are into it. But this is in different dimensions, because some people will be wondering, is it a social work of health? Yes, there is social work of health, but we are coming to the real beginning of social work and how the essence it has for us in African setting, that they are already an institution of health of their own, but social health. And that social health is how to rebuild a system that has been dilapidated because of sustainable attack and all that. Now, the healing of Africa from colonialism and neocolonialism can be achieved through the specialization of social work profession, which tally with the different areas of African colonial and neocolonial problems, such as in the area of educating the youth, public policy, leadership, social justice, monitoring and managing of foreign aid and the likes. Okay, now the institutionalization of decolonization. We're talking about decolonization. That is the basic focus of this meeting and how these groups can come in. Unusual diseases cannot be cured by everyday medicine. Colonialism and neocolonialism are not common developmental problem, which the theory of sustainable development by the United Nations can deal with, owing to the fact that the phenomenon of colonialism and neocolonialism were properly designed perhaps by the same League of Nations who designed the theory and agenda of sustainable development. Now, colonialism and neocolonialism were perfectly institutionalized to capture every aspect of African existence for continuous bondage from generation to generation. And as such, what we're looking at here is this. This was institutionalized. There is no way a hit and run approach will solve our problem. Like what our brother has started here now. If it can get to the point of getting people, because I know social work has more access to the system than any other social activities with my experience stages and all that, to track into the system and sustain it like what our brother is doing, is spreading this understanding that the basic thing is not the same theory, the same argument of sustainable development and all the rest of them. Because if you go to the 17th agenda of the sustainable development, you will be surprised to discover that almost the whole processes are in reverse order against Africa. Are you talking about sustainable development when technically all the political situation in Africa, you are the one holding Africa down? All the corruption going on in Africa, the European Union, the America, and the so-called League of Development, they are the ones holding Africans down because of what? The corruption is giving them the leeway to run their show in the system. Now, without understanding this institutionalization and how to also institutionalize decolonization, there is nothing we can achieve. Now, we want to look at the expected surgical intervention by the social workers in the institutionalization of decolonization in Africa. Social work will heal Africa from colonial and neocolonial infections by creating avenue and establishing sustainable education program within the education institution to regularize counter-colonial and neocolonial orientation among the youth. And let me tell you, education is one of the center of excellence. And to me, I will tell you, it is I came through this process, and it wasn't a kind of special course we want to do, but somebody who handled it during our own time made us mad. But as I'm talking to you now, I've written not less than 5 papers on colonialism and neocolonialism. Because of what? After going through it, I take more interest in researching on that and getting something out of it. And today, I am here boldly talking about it. And I tell you, if we can capture the educational institution to find a way to regularize, it's not definitely going to end now. It's a future agenda because youth will not grow into it and become the two, because the real development starts with you and I. Human beings are the real development about, and that's why all these so-called infrastructures and aid they are bringing to Africa, they are useless because human elements in the system are not properly developed to understand how they tally with the system. Now, the education system is one of them. Then actually the public orientation institutions such as public media, career orientation process and all that. What we're talking about, the interest here is this. Social to bring the public attention to where our problem lies. I know that we are doing other things in social work to deal with this problem, but the issue of creating this awareness and coming in as people who really want to do humanitarian work will eventually hold the population down. And from holding them down, because without that process, without the brain taking responsibility, there is nothing you can do. Otherwise, even political leaders are telling you that we are being suffering under colonialism and other, yet they cannot do anything because of what? The brain has not been subjected to the stimulation they needed to take responsibility against this. And now capturing all these processes of how you to grow into the system and then become responsible at the what we call tertiary orientation will eventually help us build an army of people who will rescue the system tomorrow, who will gradually, because what we need to do is make the system to unlearn the whole process. The other one is penetrating the policy initiation. Our brother was talking about work involved in politics. Yes, you must in politics, like in Nigeria. Move policies are very quiet, unnecessary, and the people that are moving policies are the people who are ignorant of how the system works. And I will tell you, social work professionals, social workers are the cause of their research, are the cause of their into it, and how to deal with this. And hello.
Sorry to interrupt you, Doc. If you could now conclude the presentation. We are enjoying, but time not on our side.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, penetrating the system by building, popularizing teams of Afrocentric leaders to capture the leadership system and capturing and reversing micro and macro scale foreign aids from colonialist and neo-colonialist intention into indigenous African resources for genuine and sustainable development activities. In conclusion, it's very short, very brief. The usual medicine for the pathological condition of the African system is social workers who are exceptions, are perfectly positioned with their strategic relationship with the poor masses across African nations who are in the majority of the population and of African existence, and also are more vulnerable to the impact of colonialism by exploiting the multi-dimensional approach to society, social work profession. Thank you for
Dr. Samuel, Dr. Okafor. Thank you so much. Because of our time, we'd like to entertain questions and then we allow Dr. Samuel to answer. We'd like to entertain questions from people now. Questions, comments, just in less than 5 minutes.
Thank you very much for the presentation. You touched on very important issues and the depth of the ideas that you shared. I don't have words. Thanks so much for coming. I wanted you to say a bit more about institutionalizing decolonization in Africa. I think it's an important concept, but at times when I think about it as an individual or as convener of the Africa Social Work Network, I get short of answers in terms of what is it really that we need to institutionalize. Are you able to say a bit more about it?
Okay, thank you very much. When we're talking about institutionalization, we're talking about, first of all, regularizing a process so that even when you who started it is not there, the people who are into the system will automatically fall in and be doing it. And this is what has been sustaining the world, the nations of the world over. Now, what we needed to institutionalize is this. We have social work education. We have other channels through which social work will reach out to the masses. Trying to bring a space in which basically we talk about colonialism, African relationship with other continents and other nations, gives a space. When that gives a space, for instance, we can start from the higher institution to make a specialization in this. Well, the major target I usually have when I am dealing with this kind of case is that until you capture the youth population, you have not been able to solve a problem. This is what many people don't know. Because sometimes you are dealing with a generation that will even leave this thing without transferring the message. But that interest in the youth can be captured in what we call secondary school here or high school, primary school, finding a link to, kill them in. For instance, somebody like me, right from SS1, senior secondary school 1, I started being deep into history. And from being deep into history, I become Afrocentric even before I found myself into university. With that, I had access to a book on his other books, and eventually it helped.
Yeah, I think the connection is.
Now, if we can find a channel, sometimes it's not by noise. Problem didn't bring it with noise. They were very, very quiet when they were bringing the thing. And we will also be quiet while destroying what they institutionalized. Now, getting the youth from this level to a kind of education that gradually, as you are visiting them and all the rest of them, you are bringing, and when they grow with this kind of understanding, over the years, these are the teeming population that will eventually fight this battle more than we are doing it now. And we do it properly. Because the problem, all the people you see in the leadership position today who are causing our problems today, watch the process of their education. Most of them studied abroad. And that is why, if you look at African nations, when there is election, before they start sponsoring any group from behind, they check your profile. And most of the politicians here don't know. Those profile they check is who are you and all the rest of it. Can they manipulate you? And if we can develop in our system people who have this kind of understanding, so that wherever they go in the world and return, they will have this understanding. And when they capture the system tomorrow, they will basically take this responsibility without us shouting from outside. That is one of the ways of institutionalizing it. And another one is within social work, field work. Why dealing with all these so-called international aid and all the rest of them? Yes, they will tell you they want to do this and do that and all the rest, and even give you a statistical book so that you record what you did in every minute. There is no problem. You must find a way to revive. For instance, if they say we want to reach out to the people suffering malaria, there is no problem. There are people you reach out in the village who are having malaria. By the time you start teaching them how to survive on their own, but they are coming for the drugs, so they are coming for the aid. But you are using that aid as a platform to reach out to them on how to grow on sustainable development and within African system. I think you have used the opportunity from overseas to solve your problem at home, not just giving aid and all the rest of them. From year to year, you are giving aid, yet there is no impact in the system. Thank you very much. This is the most I can say from this.
Thank you, Dr. Okafor. So we've got a lot of commendations from our participants, including our eminent professors and scholars. And the bottom line is that we have to decolonize our mind, we have to decolonize our spirit, and then we decolonize our soul so that we can unlearn. And